"If you don't go to the nursing home, you can sleep in the doghouse," my daughter exclaimed, looking me straight in the eye with contempt. I remained calm, smiled, and gathered my things, ignoring her malicious grin. Half an hour later, a limousine pulled up, and when she realized who was behind the wheel, her smile disappeared forever. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. My hand rested on the door handle of what used to be my house. The doorbell hung by tangled wires, plastic housing cracked like someone had punched it. Something twisted behind my ribs, not quite pain, more like recognition. Inside, bass-heavy music thumped through walls I'd insulated myself 20 years ago. I slid my key into the lock. Still worked, for now. The chaos hit me before I'd taken 3 steps inside. Empty Chinese takeout containers covered the coffee table I'd bought the year Helen died. The cream carpet, Helen had chosen cream despite my warnings about stains, bore a wine-dark splotch the size of a dinner plate. Someone had left the living room curtains half drawn. An afternoon light cut across the room in a way that made everything look staged, theatrical. "Dad?" Beulah appeared from the kitchen, phone in one hand, surprise flashing across her face before settling into something more guarded. "You didn't call." "Didn't think I needed an appointment." I set my briefcase down carefully, buying myself a moment to catalog what I was seeing. The leather sofa where Helen used to read, Kevin Bailey sprawled across it, bare feet on the ottoman, remote in hand like he owned the place. Maybe he thought he did. "Ronald." Kevin nodded, didn't stand. "Unexpected visit." I walked through the living room, without responding, into the dining area where Helen's mother's china cabinet stood against the wall. The cabinet door hung crooked, broken hinge, probably 2 months old based on the dust pattern, through to the kitchen. Dishes piled in the sink. The vintage wall clock Helen had restored stopped at 3:47, battery dead. The garbage bin overflowed with pizza boxes and beer bottles. Back in the living room, Kevin still hadn't moved. Beulah hovered near the hallway, arms crossed, defensive posture I recognized from her teenage years when she'd been caught doing something she knew was wrong, but planned to justify anyway. "How long has Kevin been living here?" I asked. 8 months, maybe." Beulah's voice carried that rehearsed casual tone. "What's it matter? There's plenty of room." 8 months. The utility bills made sense now. Water usage doubled, electric tripled. I'd paid them without question, the way I'd paid for everything else since her divorce from Patrick had left her, as she'd put it, financially devastated. I clicked open my briefcase with deliberate precision, the snaps loud in the sudden silence. Kevin had muted the television. Inside, I kept a folder I'd prepared that morning. 3 months of bills, property tax statement, insurance renewal. I placed the folder on the coffee table, moved aside a container of congealed lo mein to make room. "I'm selling the house," I said. "The realtor estimates $850,000, maybe more given the market. I'll use it to expand the restaurant business." The words landed like stones in still water. Beulah's mouth opened, closed. Kevin sat forward, feet hitting the floor. "Expand?" Beulah's voice climbed an octave. "You're 64. Most people your age are thinking about retiring, not building empires. This is my house. I've lived here for 3 years." I walked to the window, looked out at the street where I'd taught her to ride a bicycle when she was 6. The Henderson's oak had grown taller. The sidewalk crack she'd always jumped over had widened into a split that would need repair before listing the property. "Mr. Bell?" Kevin's voice came from directly behind me, closer than was polite. I could smell his cologne, something expensive and too heavy. "Maybe it's time to consider, well, at your age, stress isn't healthy. Running restaurants is a young man's game. Have you thought about assisted living? Some places are quite nice." I turned slowly. Kevin stood with arms crossed, chest puffed slightly, the way young men stand when they're trying to claim territory. His eyes held that particular mixture of fake concern and real calculation. Behind him, Beulah watched us both, her expression caught between hope that Kevin would fix this and fear that I wouldn't be fixed. Assisted living. I tasted the words, let them sit on my tongue. I run 3 successful restaurants. I employ 42 people. I closed a deal with a supplier yesterday that will save me $30,000 annually. Does that sound like someone who needs assistance? Each sentence came out quieter than the last. In the restaurant business, you learn that the softer you speak, the more carefully people listen. Kevin's jaw tightened. He'd expected volume, anger, something he could fight against or dismiss. Quiet unnerved him. After everything I've been through, Beulah's voice cracked, aiming for tears that didn't quite materialize. The divorce, losing Patrick's money, starting over. You're going to throw me out? What kind of father are you? I walked back to the coffee table, picked up my briefcase. The folder stayed where I'd placed it. I'm not throwing you out. I'm giving you notice that I'm selling the property. You'll need to find somewhere else to live. We're not going anywhere. Kevin moved to stand beside Beulah, protective gesture that might have worked if he hadn't been living rent-free in my house for 8 months while I paid his utilities. Beulah has rights. This is her home. I looked at the broken cabinet hinge again, the stained carpet, the crooked frame holding one of Helen's paintings, a beach scene from our trip to Hilton Head, the year before the cancer. The house wasn't a home anymore. It was a way station for people who'd confused my generosity with weakness. I'll return next week with the paperwork, I said. Beulah's mouth opened for another protest. I was already walking toward the entry hall, toward the door, with its broken doorbell and scuffed threshold. My house key, the original, cut 30 years ago, sat on the entry table where I'd left it last week, after my previous visit. I'd set it down as a test. Neither of them had touched it. Neither had earned the right to. I picked up the key, felt its familiar weight in my palm, and pocketed it with a soft click that somehow carried through Beulah's rising voice behind me. Dad, you can't just... Dad! The door closed on her words. I walked down the driveway past the overflowing trash bins, past the mailbox someone had sideswiped and never repaired, to my 10-year-old Lexus. Kevin appeared in the doorway, arms crossed again, silhouetted against the light. I didn't look back. In my car, I sat for 3 long breaths, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way my doctor had shown me after Helen died and the panic attacks had started. The steering wheel was cool under my hands. The house sat in my rearview mirror, shabby and neglected. Nothing like the home Helen and I had built together. I started the engine and pulled away, leaving them watching from the porch. 7 days. That's how long it would take to prepare what came next. 7 days. That's how long it took Attorney Effie Bailey to prepare the documents I needed. 7 days of Beulah leaving voicemails that started apologetic and ended demanding. 7 days of planning what comes next. My car pulled into the driveway at exactly 10 in the morning, early enough that they'd both be awake, late enough that any fog of sleep would have cleared. I'd chosen the time deliberately. I wanted them sharp for this. Beulah's face appeared in the living room window, then vanished. She'd been watching for me. The manila envelope sat on the passenger seat beside me, thick with documents Attorney Bailey had prepared, with the efficiency of someone who'd handled difficult family situations before. I took a moment before getting out. This was the moment of no return. Once I walked through that door with these papers, everything changed permanently. The front door opened before I could knock. Beulah stood there, face tight with anxiety, trying to disguise itself as defiance. You came. Said I would. I walked past her into the living room. Kevin sat on the sofa, different position than last week, but same territorial sprawl. The wine stain on the carpet had been scrubbed, leaving a pale blotch that somehow looked worse than the original. I moved to the kitchen table without preamble, set down the envelope, removed the documents inside, with Attorney Bailey's business card clipped to the top corner. The gesture felt formal, final, like serving papers in court, which is essentially what this was. What's that? Beulah asked, though her voice said she already knew. Sale documents and an eviction notice. 60-day notice as required by Illinois law. I slid the stack across the table's surface. The realtor will begin showings in 2 weeks. Beulah's hands moved toward the papers, then stopped. She pushed them back toward me without looking at them, the way you'd push away something contaminated. I'm not signing anything. You can't force me out of my own home. Mr. Bell? Kevin stood, walked around the table to stand too close, invading my personal space with crossed arms and puffed chest. I've researched Illinois property law. We've established legal residency here. If you try to evict us, we'll sue for unlawful eviction. The courts take tenant rights seriously. He sounded confident. He sounded knowledgeable. He was also completely wrong, but I didn't correct him immediately. In the restaurant business, you learn to let people finish their performances before you show them the kitchen's actual temperature. I looked at him steadily, the way I look at line cooks, when they've confused enthusiasm with competence. He held my gaze for maybe 5 seconds before his eyes flicked sideways to Beulah, seeking reinforcement. "This house is titled in my name." I spoke quietly, each word measured. "Beulah has been a guest. Guests can be asked to leave. The attorney's contact information is on the card." I tapped the envelope once with my index finger. "You're welcome to consult your own lawyer. They'll tell you the same thing." "A guest?" Beulah's voice jumped from disbelief to fury in one breath. "I'm your daughter. After Patrick left, you said I could stay as long as I needed. You've stayed 3 years. I've paid every bill. You've contributed nothing." The facts came out flat, undeniable. Now I need the equity for my business. Kevin's hand landed on Beulah's shoulder, protective gesture that made something cold unfold in my chest. He'd moved from guest to protector to something like co-owner, all while spending my money and damaging my property. "Listen to me very carefully," Kevin said, voice dropping to what he probably thought was a threatening register. "We're not moving. You can try to sell the house, but we'll make sure every showing is a disaster. Inspectors will find problems. We'll fight every step." Kevin's right. Beulah stepped closer to him, unified front. "And honestly, maybe it's time someone said this. You should be slowing down, Dad, spending time with family, enjoying your retirement instead of working yourself to death for a restaurant empire that nobody asked for. I'm 64, not 90. My hands gripped the table edge, knuckles going pale against the wood. I'm healthy. I'm profitable. I'm expanding because I can, because I built something that works. You're alone." Beulah's voice shifted, found a different weapon. "Mom's been gone 5 years. You live by yourself in that apartment, working 16-hour days, no life outside those kitchens. That's not healthy. That's not normal for someone your age." The words hung between us, loaded with implications about my choices, my life, my worth measured in age and loneliness rather than accomplishment. "If you're not going to the nursing home like you should," Beulah's voice rose, words tumbling out faster now, angrier, face flushed with genuine contempt she'd apparently been holding back for years. "Then go sleep in the doghouse out back where you belong. I mean it." The room went silent. Even Kevin looked startled, like Beulah had gone further than they had rehearsed. But she didn't take it back, just stood there breathing hard, chin lifted, doubling down on the cruelty. My hands, which had been gripping the table hard enough to hurt, slowly relaxed. I straightened my spine, felt something shift and settle into place inside my chest. Then I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It didn't reach my eyes. It was the smile I gave to health inspectors who tried to shake me down, to suppliers who thought I wouldn't notice their creative invoicing, to competitors who assumed my age meant weakness. Ice cracking across a frozen pond. Beulah's face changed. The defiance flickered. "Dad?" Without a word, I walked past them toward the stairs. Their confused looks tracked my movement. This wasn't the script. I was supposed to argue, or leave angry, or break down. Instead, I climbed to the second floor, walked down the hallway past the master bedroom they had claimed, to the guest room where I'd kept a few personal items stored. The duffel bags were in the closet where I'd left them. I packed methodically, 3 shirts, 2 pants, toiletries bag, the photo album from the top shelf, pictures of Helen, of Beulah as a child, of the life I'd built before it had required this kind of calculation. "Dad? Where are you going? Dad?" Beulah's voice drifted up the stairs, questions without answers. I zipped both bags, carried them downstairs. Kevin and Beulah stood in the living room, frozen in place, their earlier certainty replaced by something that might have been the first whisper of doubt. Walking past them was easy, past Beulah's outstretched hand, past Kevin's confusion, through the entry hall to the front door. At the entry table, I paused. My house key, the one I'd left here last week, the one neither of them had touched because neither truly believed I'd take the house back, sat exactly where I'd placed it. I picked it up, pocketed it with a soft click. That small action said everything about ownership, about who had rights here and who'd been playing pretend. On the porch, I set down the duffel bags and pulled out my phone. The number was already ready in my recent calls. I tapped it, waited through 2 rings. "You can pick me up now." I kept my voice level, conversational. Behind me, through the screen door, I heard Beulah's sharp intake of breath. The voice on the other end asked something. I allowed myself a small smile. Real this time, though still cold around the edges. "Yes, it's time. I'm at the house." Pause, listening. She said exactly what you predicted she'd say. I ended the call, stood waiting on the porch with my bags at my feet. Down the street, I could hear an engine in the distance, growing steadily louder. "Dad?" Beulah's voice came through the screen door, higher now, uncertain. "Dad, who's coming? What are you doing?" I didn't answer, just stood there, looking down the tree-lined street where I'd lived for 30 years, where I'd raised a daughter who just told me to sleep in a doghouse. The engine sound grew closer. Soon, everything would change. But first, I had to let them wonder. Let them worry. Let them understand that the man they had dismissed as old and manageable had been planning 3 moves ahead while they'd been playing house with his money. The car turned onto the street. I picked up my bags. Still didn't look back at the face watching me through the window. The call was made. Now I waited. Spring air carried the scent of fresh-cut grass from the Hendersons' lawn, 3 houses down. Traffic hummed on the main road, 2 blocks away. The phone in my pocket still held warmth from my palm. Behind me, I heard the front door creak open. Old hinges I'd been meaning to oil for years, but never had. I didn't turn around. Let her come to me. I'd counted to 60 twice in my head when Beulah's voice reached me from the doorway. "So, you finally figured it out, Dad?" False sweetness coated each word like sugar on poison. "That you don't belong here anymore? Good. You're making this easier than—" The words died. From the corner of my vision, I saw what had killed them. A sleek black limousine, turning the corner 3 houses down, gliding toward us with the smooth inevitability of a chess piece moving into checkmate. I checked my watch. Perfect timing. Beulah's hand flew to her throat. I heard Kevin's footsteps inside, moving toward the door, drawn by her sudden silence. The limousine slowed, its tinted windows reflecting maple trees and suburban normalcy, then pulled into the driveway with precision that spoke of professional service. The engine purred to silence. Car door opened. 1 foot planted firmly on the pavement, polished Oxford, dark slacks with razor-sharp crease. Then the driver rose to full height, adjusted his tie with casual elegance, and met Beulah's eyes across the 20 feet separating porch from driveway. Patrick Murphy looked nothing like the broken man from 3 years ago. The business suit fit him perfectly. His shoulders carried no defeated slope. His face showed no hollow desperation. He looked successful, healthy, controlled. He looked, I realized with satisfaction, exactly the way I'd hoped he would. "Hello, Beulah." His voice carried the flat professionalism of a hotel concierge addressing a difficult guest. No warmth, no anger, nothing but correct formality. He let her name hang in the air between them for a 3 count before turning to me. "Thank you, Mr. Bell, for allowing me to be your personal driver today. I hope the ride meets your expectations." The word personal landed with intentional weight. It suggested arrangement, planning, intimacy between allies. Behind Beulah, Kevin appeared in the doorway, confusion written across his face. I picked up my duffel bags, descended the porch steps without glancing at either of them, and walked to the limousine's open trunk. Patrick stood beside it, waiting with the practiced patience of someone who understood theater. I placed each bag into the trunk with deliberate care, taking my time, giving Beulah every opportunity to find words that wouldn't come. The silence did my work for me, better than any speech I could have delivered. Patrick closed the trunk with a soft, expensive thunk. He moved around the car, opened the rear passenger door, stood at attention as I settled into leather seats that smelled of lemon polish and luxury. Through the window, I saw Beulah gripping the porch railing, her knuckles white against the painted wood. The door closed. Patrick returned to the driver's seat with crisp efficiency, adjusted his rearview mirror, and caught my eye for half a second. Something passed between us, not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement. The first crack in his professional demeanor. He started the engine. The limousine eased backward out of the driveway as Kevin burst onto the porch, grabbing Beulah's arm. "Who was that? Beulah? Beulah!" His voice climbed toward panic. "Talk to me. Who was in that car? Why did he call you by name?" Through the rear window, I watched her mouth move, but we'd already turned the corner before I could see more. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what she was saying, what she was feeling, what possibilities were crashing through her mind like dominoes falling in sequence. "That went well," Patrick said from the front seat, his tone carefully neutral. "You played it perfectly." I leaned back against the headrest, let my shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. Thank you. Pleasure was all mine, Mr. Bell. Ronald? When we're not performing, it's Ronald. In the mirror, I saw his jaw tighten slightly. She looked older than I remembered. 3 years of not working will do that. I watched Evanston slide past the window, strip malls, coffee shops, the life Beulah had lived on my money while contributing nothing. Or maybe you just see her more clearly now. We drove in silence for a while, heading south toward Chicago, toward the restaurant district where my real life existed, the life I'd built through 60-hour weeks and careful decisions and refusing to quit when quitting would have been easier. Evening found us in my apartment above Bell's Tavern, exposed brick walls, comfortable furniture Helen had chosen, windows overlooking the street where my first restaurant still operated after 23 years. I poured whiskey into 2 glasses, handed one to Patrick, and settled into the armchair across from him. 3 years ago, when Beulah divorced you, I watched your restaurant collapse under debt she'd created. The whiskey burned going down, familiar and centering. I watched a good manager lose everything because he married the wrong person. Patrick stared into his glass. I made my own choices. You did, but she made hers first, and hers were designed to destroy you. I set my glass on the side table. I made some calls, bought your debts from the bank, and I've been waiting for the right moment to tell you why. He looked up then, confusion and caution warring across his features. You bought my debts 3 years ago? 2.5 years ago. The bank was going to sell them to a collections agency. I offered better terms. I never knew who... He stopped, recalculated. The payment plan that came through. The reasonable interest rate. That was you. That was me. Patrick set down his glass, stared at the amber liquid like it held answers, then met my eyes. Why? Why would you help the man who failed your daughter's marriage? The question sat between us, heavy with implications. Outside, a siren wailed past, faded into the city's constant background noise. In the restaurant below, the dinner crowd would be filling the tables, my staff moving through their routines, with the precision I'd trained into them over decades. I smiled, small, cold, the smile that appeared when someone finally asked the right question. The limousine disappeared around the corner. I stood on that porch until Kevin's questions became unbearable. Then I went inside and said nothing. For 2 weeks, I said nothing. I waited for Dad to call. He didn't. 14 days of checking my phone obsessively. 14 days of Kevin researching tenant law on his laptop, making proclamations about adverse possession and squatters' rights. 14 days of the house feeling less like a home and more like a cage with walls closing in. I started checking the mailbox 3 times a day. Thursday morning, mid-April, the mail carrier held out a clipboard for me to sign. Her expression, practiced sympathy mixed with professional distance, told me everything before I even tore open the envelope. Certified letter. Attorney Effie Bailey, at law. I recognized the name from the business card Dad had left on the kitchen table 2 weeks ago. My hands shook as I unfolded the single sheet of legal stationery. Kevin's footsteps approached from inside the house, fast and purposeful. What is it? He read over my shoulder before I could answer. His finger jabbed at the text. This is intimidation, adverse possession. If you've lived somewhere long enough, you gain rights. We'll fight this. He tapped the document again. Your father thinks he can bully us. He can't. But the words swam in front of my eyes. All financial support, including mortgage, utilities, property tax, and insurance payments, will cease effective May 1st, 2025. And below that, notice to vacate premises within 60 days per Illinois residential eviction statute. We need a lawyer, Kevin said. I know someone who handles these cases. Not expensive, probably $1,500 up front. $1,500 I didn't have. From an account Dad had stopped funding the day he walked out with Patrick driving him away, like some kind of hired chauffeur, like some kind of friend. I called Dad 6 times that first day. Voicemail, voicemail, voicemail. Dad, it's me. Can we talk? Please. The second day, I got the letter. This is extreme. We need to discuss this like adults. The third day, my voice cracking despite my efforts to control it. Dad, it's me again. Please, just call me back. We can work this out. I know I said things I shouldn't have. About the nursing home, I didn't mean. I paused, swallowed hard. Just call me, please. Nothing. 3 days of silence that felt deliberate, calculated, designed to make me understand that my father, who'd always answered when I called, always transferred money when I asked, always been there as my safety net, had cut the rope. On the fourth day, my phone buzzed with a text message. Wednesday, 2 p.m., Bell's Tavern. Nothing more. No greeting, no explanation, just an address I knew well because I'd visited his restaurant exactly twice in 20 years. Once for the grand opening I'd been too busy to care about. Once for Helen's memorial gathering I'd left early from because grief made me uncomfortable. Wednesday morning, I stood in front of my closet for 20 minutes trying to decide what to wear. Something that said I was taking this seriously, but not desperate. Something that reminded him I was his daughter. Finally settled on a navy dress Helen had complimented once, back when she was alive, and I'd pretended to care about her opinion. The drive from Evanston to downtown Chicago took 30 minutes. Every mile increased the knot in my stomach. Kevin had wanted to come, but I'd refused. This needed to be just Dad and me, father and daughter. I could still reach him on that level. I'd always been able to manipulate his guilt about Helen's death, about not being around enough during my childhood, about choosing his restaurants over his family. Bell's Tavern occupied a corner lot in a gentrified neighborhood that used to be warehouses. Exposed brick, large windows, the kind of place that served craft cocktails and attracted the lunch crowd in business casual. I'd forgotten how successful he actually was. Easy to forget when you're living in his house on his money. Inside, the lunch rush was in full swing. A hostess smiled professionally. "Can I help you?" "I'm meeting Ronald Bell." Her expression shifted to recognition. "Mr. Bell's daughter. He's in the corner booth. Follow me." The way she said Mr. Bell carried respect. The way she said daughter carried nothing, just a fact, neutral as the weather. I followed her through the crowded dining room, aware of other diners, aware of staff moving with practiced efficiency, aware that this was Dad's territory and I was the outsider. He sat in a booth near the window, reading something on his phone. He looked up as I approached, stood briefly in a gesture toward politeness, then sat again after I slid into the opposite seat. "Thank you for coming," he said, as if I'd had a choice. A waitress appeared, young, efficient, comfortable in her role. Dad signaled her without looking away from me. "The usual for me, Kelly. My daughter will have—" He paused, let the silence stretch. "Just water," I managed. My throat felt tight. "And the grilled chicken salad," Dad added. "She'll need to eat." Kelly nodded, disappeared. The casual way he'd ordered for me, the assumption that he still knew what I needed, should have annoyed me. Instead, it felt like he was demonstrating something. "This is my restaurant. These are my people. I'm in control here." I leaned forward, prepared to deploy the strategy I'd rehearsed for 3 days. "Dad, you don't understand what it was like after the divorce. Patrick left me with nothing. Nothing. I had nowhere to go. You took me in. You said I could stay as long as I needed. I'm still your daughter. Doesn't that mean anything?" The words that had always worked before, invoking family, victimhood, his protective instincts, fell flat against his expression. He didn't soften, didn't lean in, just watched me with the same evaluating stare I'd seen him use on incompetent suppliers. "Stop." His voice was controlled but harder than I'd ever heard it. "Just stop." He set down his fork. When had Kelly brought our food? With a precise click against the plate. "You're 38 years old. You've never held a job. You spent 3 years spending my money like it was yours. I paid for your college. You didn't finish. I gave you a home. You trashed it. Enough lies about a hard childhood that never existed." Each sentence landed like a slap. I tried to reach across the table, grab his hand, force him to acknowledge our connection. He moved his hand smoothly to pick up his water glass, the evasion so natural it could have been accidental, but we both knew it wasn't. "Kevin says we have rights," I tried, desperate now. "Tenant rights through long-term residency. You can't just throw us out." "Illinois law is clear. You're not a tenant. You never paid rent. You were a guest." He took a sip of water, set the glass down. "Kevin is wrong. Your lawyer will tell you the same thing." Around us, the lunch crowd's conversation created a wall of sound. Laughter, clinking glasses, the comfortable noise of people who had jobs and lives and didn't depend on their fathers at 38. Dad pulled out his wallet, extracted several bills. "Here's what's real. You have skills you've never used because you've never had to. Find a job within 30 days. Prove you're serious about being independent. If you do, I'll give you 3 more months rent-free to save money in transition. A job. The word hung between us like a foreign language. A job? My voice rose despite my attempts at control. I've never worked. I don't have skills. You want me to flip burgers? Several nearby diners glanced over. Dad's manager, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes, looked our direction, but Dad gave a tiny head shake, and she redirected the staff's attention, protecting his privacy while letting him handle it. He stood, placed the bills on the table, more than enough to cover the meal I'd barely touched. Here's the offer. Find work, any work, and I'll extend your housing through August. He looked down at me, his expression not angry, but something worse. Disappointed. Final. Or don't, and be out by June 30th. Your choice. You've always had choices, Beulah. You just kept choosing wrong. He walked away. Through the restaurant, toward the kitchen and office area, not looking back. I sat alone at the booth, the lunch crowd's noise pressing in from all sides, making my isolation feel physical. A waitress approached tentatively. Miss, can I get you anything else? I couldn't answer, just stared at the money on the table. Exact amount plus generous tip, typical of his thorough fairness, even when cutting me off. Outside the window, Chicago traffic flowed past. Spring sunshine made everything look deceptively cheerful. 30 days to find a job. 30 days to prove I could be someone other than Ronald Bell's dependent daughter. 30 days to figure out who I was when no one was paying my bills. I sat there for 3 full minutes, the world moving around me, before I finally pushed back my chair and walked out through the restaurant that might as well have been a gauntlet of judgment. I gave Beulah 30 days to find work. I didn't expect her to succeed. What I expected was Kevin to escalate, to make a mistake born of desperation. So I hired someone to document exactly who was living in my house. The investigator's report arrived 1 week later, 43 pages, cost $12,500, worth every dollar. Late afternoon light slanted through the blinds in my restaurant office, cutting stripes across the document spread before me. I reached for my yellow highlighter, a habit from my accounting days before I owned restaurants, and marked the relevant passages with methodical precision. Page 7. Kevin Bailey's current debt load totaled $67,000 across 9 creditors. 3 credit cards maxed out and blocked. 2 collection agencies actively pursuing judgments. Page 12. The business coaching empire he'd mentioned to Beulah was actually a pyramid scheme called Summit Success Strategies, currently under investigation by the Illinois Consumer Fraud Bureau for deceptive trade practices. Page 18. His last legitimate employment ended 14 months ago when he was terminated from a car dealership for falsifying financing applications. I didn't smile. This wasn't satisfaction, this was chess. I picked up my phone and called attorney Effie Bailey. I need you to deliver a document package to Beulah, I said. Formal legal channel, cover letter stating this is information relevant to persons residing in property subject to eviction notice. The investigator's report? Effie's voice carried no judgment. She'd been practicing family law for 30 years. She'd seen worse. Complete file, credit reports, debt documentation, the fraud investigation, everything. She won't thank you for this. I'm not looking for gratitude. I'm looking for informed decisions. 2 days later, Beulah sat in the Evanston house living room, my living room, when the delivery arrived. Thick manila envelope, certified mail, attorney Effie Bailey's return address embossed in the corner. I wasn't there to see her open it, but Patrick described it to me later. He'd driven past the house at my request, timing it perfectly to see her standing at the mailbox, tearing the envelope open. Documents spilled across her lap. Photocopied credit reports stamped "Past Due" in aggressive red ink. Collection agency letters with threatening language. The formal Consumer Fraud Bureau complaint against Summit Success Strategies. She read, he said, with growing horror. Her hands began to shake somewhere around page 5. Kevin arrived home an hour later to find the document spread across the kitchen table, like evidence at a crime scene. Beulah stood with arms crossed, defensive posture I'd seen 1,000 times before, the stance that said she was hurt and cornered and looking for someone to fight. $67,000? Her voice was tight, controlled. 3 blocked credit cards, and this... She held up the official letter from the Consumer Fraud Bureau. Says your business coaching is being investigated for fraud. You told me you were building a consulting empire. Kevin's face cycled through reactions: surprise, calculation, defensiveness. He went with wounded dignity. I made mistakes. Long pause, letting the admission hang. Yes, before I met you, I'm climbing out of that hole. He reached for her hand across the table. But don't you see what he's doing? Your father hired a private investigator to dig up my past. He's trying to isolate you, Beulah, to make you think I'm the enemy so you'll have no one but him. Beautiful, really. Turn exposure into proof of persecution. Make the evidence itself the crime. Beulah pulled her hand back. You lied to me about your debts. I didn't lie. I just didn't burden you with problems I'm solving. His voice dropped to urgent intimacy. Think about it. He's manipulating you. This whole eviction, the job ultimatum, now digging into my private financial history. He wants you desperate and alone so you'll come crawling back, grateful and obedient. I could picture the scene. Kevin leaning forward, body language open and vulnerable. Beulah wanting to believe him because the alternative was admitting she'd aligned herself with another disaster. There's a solution, Kevin said softly. Marry me this week. Silence. I imagine Beulah staring at him, trying to process the leap from debt exposure to marriage proposal. If we're married, you're protected, Kevin continued. Inheritance laws. You'd have claim to half of everything he owns if something happened. It's leverage, insurance. He can't just throw you away if you have legal protection. That's not, Beulah's voice barely audible. That's not how marriage should. Would you rather be homeless? Kevin cut her off, voice sharpening. Your father gave you 30 days to find a job you've never had skills for. He's setting you up to fail. This is survival, Beulah. This is us against him. Patrick told me she agreed within 10 minutes. Fear does that. Makes bad decisions feel like life rafts. The next day, they drove to the county clerk's office in downtown Chicago. Application fee, $60. Waiting period, 5 days, minimum required by Illinois law. Kevin filled out the paperwork while Beulah sat beside him, staring at the form like it was written in a language she almost understood. When he slid it to her for signature, she paused, pen hovering. Some part of her knew this was wrong, that marrying someone despite your father or claim future inheritance wasn't love or partnership or anything worth building. But that knowing part was weak compared to the terrified part that saw herself homeless and jobless at 38. She signed. They set the ceremony date for the following Wednesday, early as possible after the waiting period. Kevin insisted they keep the marriage secret from me until the right moment. Specifically, he meant court proceedings, where they'd spring it on me as leverage. Beulah, desperate for any anchor in the storm, agreed. While Kevin plotted his marriage trap, I sat in a quiet coffee shop in downtown Chicago's financial district, watching Patrick Murphy walk through the door. He spotted me in the corner booth, approached with the cautious body language of someone expecting bad news. Thanks for meeting, I said, gesturing to the seat across from me. Your text said you had a business proposition. Patrick sat, ordered coffee from the hovering waitress, then focused on me with guarded attention. I wasn't sure if that was code for something else. I pulled a folder from my briefcase and slid it across the table. 3 weeks ago, Murphy's table came up for foreclosure auction. The bank was selling to recoup losses. I tapped the folder. I bought it, $85,000, the building, equipment, licenses, your name on the door, all of it, and I'd like to offer you a partnership. Patrick stared at the folder like it might explode. His hand moved toward it, stopped, moved again. Finally, he opened it. Inside, the deed of sale bearing my name. Bank foreclosure stamp dated 3 weeks prior. Business license, liquor license, health permits. All transferred to my ownership. And his name? Murphy's Table. Still on every document in the font he'd chosen 5 years ago, when he'd had dreams instead of debts. You bought my restaurant. His voice came out flat, processing slowly. I bought a foreclosed property with strong bones and an established reputation, I corrected. I'm offering you operations director position. $75,000 annually plus 20% profit share after initial investment is recouped. Full operational control. I'm the financial partner. You're the restaurant operator. He pushed the folder back toward me, face hardening. This is about her, isn't it? You bought my failed restaurant to... What? Rub my face in it? Prove something to Beulah about how I couldn't make it work. His voice carried an edge I hadn't heard before, the sound of old wounds tearing open. I don't need charity disguised as revenge. I watched Patrick stare at the deed. I could see him calculating, wondering if this was kindness or cruelty. I let him wonder. Some things a man needs to figure out for himself. I pulled your financial records from before the divorce, I said. Public documents, court filings, foreclosure proceedings, all legal. Customer ratings averaged 4.6 stars over 2 years. Profit margins stayed steady at 18% until... I slid a spreadsheet across the table. Until here. Month your joint credit card debt hit $60,000, then $70,000, then $94,000. Patrick's eyes followed the numbers, his jaw tightening with recognition. You didn't fail, I continued. You drowned. He looked up from the spreadsheet, something raw crossing his face. Why? His voice cracked slightly. Why would you help the man who divorced your daughter? Most fathers would. Most fathers don't watch their daughters destroy good people and blame everyone else. I leaned back, let my guard drop just enough that he could see the truth under the strategy. You showed better judgment than I did. You got out. I'm still fighting to get my house back from her and her new parasite. Pause. Besides, you succeeding again will irritate her more than anything I could say. Consider it a bonus. Patrick studied me for a long moment. Then, slowly, he pulled the folder back toward him. Opened it fully. His fingers traced over the foreclosure documents, the deed with my name where his used to be, the business licenses still bearing Murphy's Table in his original font choice. His hand stopped trembling when he reached the proposed partnership contract, clipped to the back. One condition, I said, the partnership stays quiet until the right moment. I want the papers finalized, renovations started, but no announcement, no social media, no press release. When the time comes, and you'll know when, we reveal it together. Agreed? Why the secrecy? Because timing matters in chess. Because I want every piece positioned before the endgame begins. I met his eyes. And because when Beulah finds out I helped rebuild your life while dismantling hers, I want it to hit with maximum impact. Patrick's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but held grim satisfaction. Agreed. We shook hands across the table. His grip was firm. Not desperate, not grateful, just solid. The handshake of equals entering a business arrangement that happened to serve revenge as a side benefit. When do we start renovations? Patrick asked, already shifting into planning mode. Next week, keep your phone handy. I'll have the contractor contact you directly. We discussed logistics for another 20 minutes, reopening timeline, menu concepts, staffing needs. Patrick transformed as he talked, shoulders straightening, voice gaining confidence, the defeated man from 3 years ago disappearing sentence by sentence. This was who he'd been before Beulah's debts had crushed him. This was who he could be again. I paid for our coffees and stood. One more thing. The restaurant's books were clean. Your management was sound. Don't doubt that. He nodded, something like relief flooding his expression. Thank you, Ronald. Outside the coffee shop, spring sunshine cut through Chicago's downtown canyon of buildings. Patrick headed toward the L station, folder tucked under his arm, like a treasure he couldn't quite believe was real. I watched him go, then pulled out my phone to check messages. Nothing from Beulah. Good. Let her stew in Kevin's manipulation for a while. Let her make her desperate choices without my interference. The best traps are the ones people build for themselves. 5 days later, Wednesday early May, Beulah stood in Chicago City Hall wearing a simple dress she'd bought on Kevin's credit card. The one he'd promised was paid off. It wasn't, but she didn't know that yet. She was about to marry a man whose debts totaled more than she'd ever earned in her life. 0 plus negative 67,000 equals negative 67,000. She'd never been good at math. The City Hall clerk's office smelled like floor polish and recycled air. No flowers, no music, no guests. Just Beulah, Kevin, and the clerk who'd performed this ceremony 4 times already that morning and had 3 more scheduled after lunch. Kevin stood beside her in a suit that looked expensive, but probably wasn't. He'd combed his hair back, attempting solemnity that didn't quite reach his eyes. His hand gripped hers with possessive pressure, not comfort, but ownership. By the power vested in me by the state of Illinois, the clerk droned through standard ceremony language, I now pronounce you married. Congratulations. The word congratulations landed in the sterile room like a formality no one believed. Beulah stared at Kevin's profile during the vows, noticing for the first time how his smile didn't reach his eyes when he said, "I do." She blinked, swallowed, said her own vows like reading from a script she hadn't memorized properly. They signed the marriage certificate. Kevin immediately pulled out his phone, insisted on a photo, the two of them holding the certificate up to the camera, his arm tight around her waist. She managed a smile. Later, looking at the photo, she'd see her own eyes showed someone drowning, while everyone else saw someone swimming. "Remember," Kevin said as they walked out of City Hall into mild spring weather, "we don't tell your father yet, not until the court hearing. That's when we use this." He tapped the marriage certificate he'd already tucked into his jacket pocket. "Maximum impact. He'll have to negotiate with us then." "Right." Beulah's voice came out hollow. "Maximum impact." She clutched the copy of their marriage certificate, the one she was allowed to keep, and tried to feel married. Tried to feel anything besides the growing certainty that she'd just signed another document she didn't fully understand, making promises to another person who saw her as a means rather than an end. In the car driving back to Evanston, Kevin was already on his phone, researching spousal inheritance rights Illinois, while Beulah stared out the window at Chicago traffic. The spring sunshine that had seemed promising that morning now just made everything look overexposed, too bright, showing all the cracks in the facade. She was married to a man with $67,000 in debts, living in a house her father was evicting her from in 43 days, without a job, without skills, without any clear path forward except Kevin's promises about leverage and legal protection and inheritance rights that somehow would solve everything. The marriage certificate in her lap felt less like a shield and more like another weight dragging her down. Meanwhile, that same afternoon, Patrick Murphy met with a contractor at Murphy's table. The building that used to be his, now, was mine. Soon would be ours. They walked through the space, discussing renovations, new kitchen equipment, fresh paint, updated dining room chairs, a revamped menu board. "When's the target opening date?" the contractor asked. Patrick pulled out his phone, checked the calendar, calculated. 8 weeks, June 30th. He didn't know that was also Beulah's eviction deadline. Didn't know that Ronald had chosen the timeline deliberately so that the same day Beulah lost the house, Patrick would be cutting the ribbon on his second chance. I knew, though. I'd planned it that way. Because justice isn't just about punishment. It's about restoration, taking from those who stole, giving to those who were robbed. Patrick texted me from the restaurant. "Contractor estimates 8 weeks, targeting June 30th. Opening, that work for you?" I typed back, "Perfect timing." 2 secrets running parallel. 2 plans unfolding simultaneously. Beulah and Kevin thought they'd gain leverage through marriage. Patrick and I were building something that would render their leverage irrelevant. Neither side knew what the other was doing. The collision was inevitable. I just had to wait for the pieces to move into position. 3 weeks after Beulah signed her marriage certificate, I made a phone call to Commonwealth Edison. Close the account at 847 Oakwood Drive, effective June 1st. The representative confirmed. I hung up. It wasn't cruelty. It was consequence. The house was mine. The bills were mine. And I was done paying them. June 1st arrived on a Wednesday. Beulah woke to silence. Wrong silence. The house always hummed. Refrigerator compressor, central air, the subtle electric buzz of modern life. Now, nothing. She reached for the bedside lamp. Click. Nothing. Through the window, she could see the Hendersons' porch lights still on. Just their house, then. Kevin stirred beside her, mumbling about the heat already building in the June morning. She flipped light switches in different rooms, kitchen, living room, bedroom, as if the problem was just a tripped breaker. Kevin checked the electrical panel in the basement. Everything in order. The power company had simply cut service at the pole outside. The kitchen tap produced nothing when she tried it. No water pressure, no familiar rush through old pipes. Kevin spent 90 minutes on hold with utility companies, bouncing between departments, his jaw tightening with each transfer. Finally, a representative explained with professional firmness, the account was closed by the property owner, Mr. Ronald Bell, effective June 1st. To establish new service in your names, we require a deposit of $2,100 plus first month service of $2,100. Total, $4,200. Kevin's hand covered the phone. He shut off the utilities. This is illegal. This is harassment. We can sue for this. But it wasn't illegal. I'd given proper notice. 60 days since the eviction letter. The house was mine. The accounts were mine. They wanted utilities. They could pay for them. Kevin had no choice. He put the charges on his remaining credit cards, the ones not yet completely maxed out. I learned this later, from the paper trail Effie Bailey assembled. That $4,200 expense pushed him from nearly insolvent to effectively bankrupt. 5 credit cards laid out on the kitchen table like losing poker hands. 4 maxed, 1 with $300 remaining limit. Within 3 days, Kevin had convinced Beulah to sue me. Their attorney, Jason Chen, who advertised on bus benches and took cases for $1,500 retainers, specialized in tenant disputes. He saw this as a winnable, father taking advantage of dependent daughter case. Probably needed the money himself. The lawsuit arrived at Bell's Tavern during lunch rush. Process server found me reviewing inventory in my office. I read it once. Emotional abuse and financial exploitation of vulnerable family member. Constructive eviction. Illegal harassment through weaponization of utilities. I called Effie Bailey. They sued. Good. Add it to the file. The process server looked unnerved by my complete lack of reaction. I signed his receipt and went back to my inventory count. 42 pounds of ribeye, 12 pounds short of what we'd ordered. I made a note to call the supplier. Details matter. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for mid-June. I arrived at the courthouse with Effie, carrying a single folder. Beulah stood in the hallway with Kevin and their attorney, rehearsing strategy in urgent whispers. When she saw me, she froze. I nodded politely, the way you acknowledge an acquaintance in a professional setting, and walked past to speak with the clerk. In the hallway, Jason Chen was coaching Beulah. Remember, emphasize the emotional aspect. You're his daughter. He took you in after a difficult divorce, then suddenly turned cruel. The jury will sympathize with family bonds over property rights. But we're not going to jury trial, are we? Beulah's voice carried uncertainty. This is just a hearing. It's all theater, Mrs. Bailey. We make him look like the villain. That's how we win. The hearing itself was procedural. The judge, a woman in her 50s who'd seen every family drama Cook County could produce, reviewed documents with the tired efficiency of someone who knew most cases settled before trial. Mrs. Bailey, you claim constructive eviction and emotional abuse, but these documents show you've resided in your father's property rent-free for 3 years. She looked over her glasses. And you were married 3 weeks ago, but didn't inform the court until today? This was Beulah's surprise play, the one Kevin had convinced her would change everything. Yes, Your Honor. We married because my father's actions were causing such stress on our relationship. He's trying to destroy our family because he disapproves of Kevin. The judge examined the marriage certificate Kevin had produced with theatrical flourish. Then the property deed bearing my name. Then the eviction notice, legally proper and filed through appropriate channels. I'm setting the main hearing for July 28th, she said. Until then, status quo is maintained. Mrs. Bailey and Mr. Bailey may continue residing in the property. However, she fixed Kevin with a look that suggested she'd dealt with his type before. There will be no removal or alteration of property contents without written permission from the owner. Understood? Yes, Your Honor, Jason Chen answered quickly. Outside the courthouse, Kevin pulled Beulah into a tight hug that looked more possessive than affectionate. Did you see his face when you announced the marriage? He didn't expect that. Now, he can't just kick you out. You're a married woman with rights. We've got leverage now. Over his shoulder, I watched Beulah's expression, uncertain, searching my face for reaction. Anger, hurt, anything that would prove I still cared enough to be affected. I loaded my briefcase into my car with the same methodical precision I brought to every task. No hurry, no drama. He didn't look surprised, Kevin. Beulah's voice drifted across the parking lot. He looked like he already knew, like it didn't matter. That's just his poker face. Trust me, we're winning. But they weren't winning. They'd just announced a 3-week-old marriage to a man who'd predicted their desperation would drive them to exactly this move. I'd told Patrick 2 months ago that Kevin would try to secure Beulah through marriage. I'd been right. Effie Bailey unlocked her car next to mine. Are you surprised? No, disappointed maybe, that she's that predictable. I opened my trunk, revealing several banker's boxes I'd prepared the night before. Prepare all the documents, bank statements, utility bills, the investigator's report on Kevin, Patrick's divorce records showing Beulah's spending, everything. I want the judge to see the complete picture. How do you want to present the evidence? Chronologically. I closed the trunk. I want the judge to see exactly how we got here, step by step, dollar by dollar. I looked back toward the courthouse where Kevin was still celebrating his imaginary victory. She thinks marriage changes the game. It doesn't. It just makes the ending clearer. 6 weeks, $12,600. I stared at the number on the calculator like it might change if I looked hard enough. The utility bills sat in a neat stack beside my coffee. Paid. All on Kevin's credit cards. Cards that were now, according to him, temporarily at their limits. Temporary. Everything with Kevin was temporary. Temporary setback. Temporary cash flow problem. Temporary living situation. Nothing was ever his fault. Nothing was ever permanent. After the preliminary hearing, Kevin convinced himself we'd won. I knew better. The judge's face had shown what she really thought. Skeptical. But Kevin needed to believe we had leverage. I needed something else. I needed to survive until the main hearing with some dignity intact. The utility bills destroyed that plan in 6 weeks. I spread them across the kitchen table. Electric, water, gas, trash collection. Each stamped paid in red ink. Then I opened my banking app. Balance 347s. The account had held $15,000 3 months ago. Money I'd gotten from selling jewelry after my divorce from Patrick. Now, almost gone. Kevin paced the kitchen, his voice rising with each pass. Just call him, one phone call. Tell him we need help with the bills until the court hearing. He's your father. He'll give you money if you ask right. Cry a little, use the daughter card. I'm not calling him. My voice came out flat. You don't understand? He won't help. He's different now. He's done with me. Then what good are you? Kevin stopped pacing, stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Raw contempt. What's the point of marrying someone whose father has money if you won't even... He stopped himself. But the damage was done. The sentence hung in the air between us, complete in its incompleteness. What's the point of marrying you? We'll take a loan against the house, Kevin said, switching tactics. Home equity. We've got, $800,000 in property value? We can borrow enough to cover us until the hearing, then pay it back after we win. The bank lobby smelled like air conditioning and carpet cleaner. The loan officer smiled with professional warmth that faded as she pulled up the property title on her computer. I'm sorry, but we cannot extend a loan secured against property you don't legally own. She rotated the screen to show us. Ronald Bell's name highlighted in yellow. Without his signature as co-borrower or property owner consent, this application cannot proceed. Kevin's hand tightened on my arm. Painful, possessive. This is our house. She's lived here 3 years. That counts for something legally. I understand your frustration, but property law is clear. I'm sorry. In the car afterward, Kevin drove too fast, his jaw working silently. I watched suburban Chicago blur past the window and felt something settle in my chest. A cold understanding. I didn't own anything. The house was Dad's, the furniture was Dad's. Even the utility accounts were in Dad's name until Kevin had been forced to open new ones. I'd lived 3 years in a space that belonged entirely to someone else, and I'd mistaken occupancy for ownership. Over the next 2 weeks, Kevin started selling things. He began with items I'd accumulated, designer handbags, expensive shoes, jewelry I'd bought during my marriage to Patrick, posted them on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, local auction sites. Then he moved to furniture. The leather armchairs from the study, the brass lamps, Mom's china cabinet. I watched him photograph each item in afternoon light, arranging them carefully like a catalog. His face showed concentration, not guilt. These are your mother's things, I said, when he started listing the cherrywood dining table. The one Dad said was Mom's favorite, worth $4,000. Your mother's dead. Your father abandoned it. We need money. He adjusted the camera angle. Unless you've suddenly figured out how to earn some. The sneer in his voice was new, or maybe not new, maybe just no longer hidden. He raised about $8,000 over 2 weeks. It disappeared into bills and food and the interest payments on his maxed credit cards. I didn't ask for details. I'd stopped asking questions when the answers became too ugly to hear. Mid-July, a Thursday afternoon. I was in the bedroom when I heard heavy footsteps on the porch. Deep voices. Through the window, I saw a sheriff's vehicle parked at the curb. Downstairs, Kevin stood in the doorway holding a brass lamp, about to list it, probably worth $800. The sheriff handed him a thick envelope. Kevin's face went carefully blank as he read. I took the document from his hands when he came inside. Supplemental complaint, theft and conversion of property, itemized list of missing items, totaling $18,000, demand for immediate return or restitution. The list was detailed, precise. Cherrywood dining table, $4,000. Leather armchairs, set of 2, $3,200. China cabinet with contents, $4,500. Brass lamps, pair, $1,600, on and on. Each item documented with original purchase receipts, photographs from the house, current market values. "We're stealing from him," I said. My voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from someone else. "Kevin, we're stealing from my father. He abandoned this stuff. He walked out with 2 bags, remember? He doesn't care about furniture. He cares about the law." I looked at him, really looked, saw him clearly for maybe the first time. "And now we've given him more ammunition." My voice dropped. "This was your plan? To make me a thief? My plan was to secure our future." His face flushed red. "Your plan was to be useless. Can't get a job, can't ask daddy for money, can't do anything except spend and take and blame everyone else." He stepped toward me. Not a casual step, an aggressive step. "You want to know why Patrick left you? Why your father hates you? Because you're a black hole that sucks money and gives nothing back." His fist hit the wall 6 inches from my head. The impact sent drywall dust into my hair. I froze completely. This was new. This was different. This was dangerous. Kevin stormed downstairs. I heard bottles clinking, heard him muttering to himself in the angry circular way drunk people do when they're working themselves up to something worse. I called Jason Chen, our attorney, from the bedroom with the door locked. My father filed another lawsuit for property theft. Can he do that while we're already in litigation? Unfortunately, yes. Jason sighed, already sounding defeated. "Mrs. Bailey, I need to be honest. This new filing significantly damages our position. The judge will see this, and it's documented theft, with photographs, dollar amounts. This is not good." After he hung up, I sat on the bed in the room that wasn't mine, in the house that wasn't mine, married to a man who'd just punched a wall next to my head. I opened my laptop, typed Illinois annulment fraud into the search bar. The results loaded. My finger hovered over the mouse pad. Downstairs, Kevin's muttering grew louder, angrier. I closed the laptop without reading. Wasn't ready to admit I'd made this mistake. Wasn't ready to face what leaving would mean. Homeless, jobless, admitting defeat to my father, who'd predicted every step of this disaster. 2 weeks until the hearing. 14 days to figure out how to survive this. 14 days trapped in a house with a man whose mask had finally slipped completely off. Through the floor, I heard glass breaking, Kevin cursing, the sound of furniture scraping. I pulled my knees to my chest and stared at the closed laptop, at the bills on the nightstand, at the marriage certificate in the drawer, paper shield against a storm it had actually summoned. $12,600 spent in 6 weeks. $18,000 in theft charges. $67,000 in Kevin's pre-existing debts. The math finally made sense. 0 plus all these negatives still equaled negative. I'd never been good at math, but even I could calculate what was coming. In his restaurant office that same night, Dad reviewed Effie Bailey's evidence file. I imagined him there. I'd seen the office once, years ago. Neat desk, everything in its place. He'd be adding the itemized list of stolen property to the growing collection of documentation, adding Kevin's violence to the pattern of escalation, building his case piece by methodical piece. He'd check his calendar, count the days. 14. The trap was closing. I was inside it, and the man I'd married to save myself had been the one to spring it. The courtroom smelled like old wood and anxiety. I sat at the plaintiff's table between Kevin and our attorney, Jason Chen, whose confident predictions from last week had evaporated into nervous paper shuffling. Across the aisle, my father sat with Effie Bailey, surrounded by boxes of documents. He looked like he was attending a business meeting. I looked like I was attending my own trial, which I was beginning to realize I was. The 2 weeks between the theft charge and the court date passed in a blur of arguments with Kevin and silence from my father. Jason Chen kept saying we had a chance. Judges sympathize with family, marriage creates legal protection, my father's age might work against him. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But when I walked into that courtroom and saw the boxes of evidence at my father's feet, belief became harder. All rise, the Honorable Judge Margaret Hayworth presiding. We stood. The judge entered, took her seat with brisk efficiency, reviewed the file before her. She looked like someone who'd heard every family excuse Chicago could produce and believed none of them. Jason Chen stood for his opening statement, voice carrying practiced sympathy. Your Honor, this is a case about a vulnerable daughter taken advantage of by her wealthy father. Mr. Bell promised his daughter housing after a difficult divorce, then cruelly withdrew support when she tried to build a new life with her husband. We're asking the court to recognize basic human decency and family obligation. Effie Bailey rose. No theatrics, just facts delivered in measured tones. Your Honor, the facts are straightforward. Mr. Ronald Bell owned a property. He allowed his adult daughter to reside there rent-free for 3 years following her divorce. He provided $151,200 in financial support during that time. When he legally terminated that arrangement, she sued him for providing exactly what the law entitled him to provide. Nothing. This is not a case about family obligation. This is a case about property rights and financial responsibility. $151,200. Hearing it spoken aloud. The total of 3 years of bills, utilities, expenses, made something cold settle in my stomach. That's what my independence had cost. That's what I'd taken while contributing nothing. Effie began presenting evidence with methodical precision. She stood at her table and removed documents from bankers' boxes, creating neat stacks labeled with numbered exhibit tags. Each movement precise. Each paper placed exactly where it needed to be, building a physical wall of evidence. Property deed, Ronald Bell, sole owner, utility bills, 36 months of electricity, water, gas, trash collection, all paid by Ronald Bell. Bank statements, 3 years of transfers totaling $151,200 for living expenses. Then came the document I'd forgotten signing. Gift of use agreement dated 3 years ago, my signature at the bottom. Language stating I could reside in the house at owner's discretion, revocable at any time, no ownership transfer implied. I remembered signing it vaguely. Dad had said it was a formality, something for his tax records. I hadn't read it, hadn't thought it mattered. Now it mattered more than anything. The theft evidence followed. Photographs of missing furniture, the cherry wood dining table, leather armchairs, brass lamps, Mom's china cabinet. Screenshots from Kevin's online sale listings with prices clearly visible. Neighbor testimony about a moving truck. Total documented value, $18,000. Then Effie said 4 words that stopped my heart. I call Patrick Murphy. My hand flew to my mouth. Kevin leaned toward Jason Chen, whispering frantically. Patrick walked to the witness stand, my ex-husband, looking healthy and composed. Nothing like the broken man from 3 years ago. He took the oath, sat, met Effie's eyes, not mine. Mr. Murphy, you were married to the plaintiff from 2019 to 2022, correct? Yes. During that marriage, what was your financial situation? Patrick's testimony was factual, calm, devastating. During our marriage, Beulah spent $94,000 we didn't have. Designer clothes she wore once, trips to places we couldn't afford, renovating an apartment we were renting. He held up bank statements, pointing to specific line items. I tried to talk to her. She said I was being controlling. When the restaurant failed, she blamed me for not earning enough. I lost everything. I couldn't look at him, couldn't look at my father, stared at my lap while Patrick's voice continued. Mr. Bell reviewed my management records and hired me because he saw I was competent, just buried under debt I didn't create. He gave me a second chance. Beulah never valued what she had. She still doesn't. Judge Hayworth looked at me over her glasses. Mrs. Bailey, do you dispute these financial records, the spending documented in your former husband's testimony? Those purchases were, I needed those things. After my divorce, I was depressed. Shopping helped. My father understood. He never complained about the money. Your father was not obligated to fund retail therapy indefinitely. Answer the question, are these records accurate? My voice came out barely audible. Yes. The judge removed her glasses and set them on the bench with deliberate care. The courtroom went completely silent. I find for the defendant on all counts. Mrs. Bailey, you resided in your father's property as a guest, not a tenant. He provided substantial financial support for 3 years. He followed proper legal procedure to terminate that arrangement. Your claims of emotional abuse and financial exploitation are contradicted by evidence showing you exploited his generosity repeatedly. She looked directly at me. Her expression held no sympathy. Furthermore, the documented theft of $18,000 in property is unconscionable. You have 15 days to vacate. Restitution of $18,000 is ordered. Court costs of $3,200 are assessed to plaintiff. This case is dismissed with prejudice. Kevin stood so abruptly his chair knocked backward. He walked out without a word to me, footsteps echoing through the silent courtroom. My father and Effie Bailey gathered their materials. As they passed our table, Dad paused briefly. Met my eyes. No triumph, no anger, just acknowledgement. You should call a moving company. 15 days goes faster than you think. Dad, he continued walking. The judge gave you 2 weeks. Use them wisely. I sat frozen while the bailiff waited patiently by the door. Finally, his gentle Mrs. Bailey, you need to leave now, broke through my paralysis. I walked out into bright July sunlight, looked for Kevin's car in the parking lot. The space where he'd parked was empty. He'd left without me. Jason Chen appeared beside me on the courthouse steps. I can't help you with the eviction. That's final. I'm sorry. He walked away. I stood alone, phone in hand, 15 days on the clock. No idea what came next. The house echoed. 15 days to strip a life down to boxes. 15 days to understand that Kevin was never going to help pack. He'd left 3 days after the court ruling. 1 text message, no explanation needed. This isn't working out. Like we'd been dating, not married. Like he hadn't vowed anything that mattered. I sat on the floor surrounded by boxes labeled in my handwriting. Kitchen, bedroom, things I thought I needed. That last box was the fullest. 15 days. The judge's words echoed through every hour. Vacate the property. Restitution of $18,000. Kevin lasted 3 of those days before disappearing. I spent the rest packing a life I'd never actually lived, preparing to move to nowhere, and waiting for my father to arrive for the final confrontation. He came at exactly 10 o'clock on day 15. I heard his car in the driveway, his footsteps on the porch. He knocked formally, despite having a key. I opened the door, stepped back silently to let him enter. He walked through the house slowly, ran his hand along the stair railing, smooth, polished, cared for. Paused at the patched drywall in the hallway where Kevin's fist had gone through, repaired but visible if you knew where to look. A scar that would fade but never disappear completely. You cleaned, he said. It's your house. I tried to fix what I could. Professional movers arrived shortly after. Dad had hired them. I watched from the window as they loaded boxes into a truck, bound for a storage facility he'd arranged. Prepaid for 3 months, he told me. $450, another expense on my tab. We stood in the empty living room. The space looked bigger without furniture, smaller without the life I'd pretended to live in it. Where's Kevin? Dad asked. Gone. 3 days after court. Loaded his car. Sent a text. I tried to laugh. It came out hollow. He left me with $8,000 in credit card debt. Joint card I never applied for. He forged my signature. You can dispute that with the credit company. Fraud claims. Effie Bailey can help. I don't know how to do any of this. My voice broke. I've never had a real job. I don't know how to be normal. How to be a person who works and pays bills and doesn't... I gestured helplessly at the empty house. Doesn't destroy everything they touch. Dad reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. Set it on the windowsill between us. What's that? Employment contract. Restaurant administrator position at Murphy's Table. Salary $38,000 annually. Health insurance, 401k matching. First 2 months, company provides furnished studio apartment. Rent and utilities paid. After that, your responsibility. I stared at the envelope like it might explode. "This is real work," he continued. "No special treatment. You report to Patrick as operations director. 90-day probationary period. If you can't do the job, he'll fire you. If you show up drunk, you're done. If you steal, you're done. But if you actually try, you might surprise yourself." I opened the envelope with shaking hands. The contract was detailed, professional, real. My signature line waited at the bottom. "Why?" I looked up at him through tears. "After everything, the lawsuit, the things I said, what Kevin did, why would you help me now?" "Because you're my daughter. That doesn't give you the right to my money or my house or my patience. But it means I'll give you one chance to figure out who you actually are when nobody's handing you things." He paused. "Your mother would have done the same. One last chance. But this time, you earn it. Childhood is over, Beulah. It ended 20 years ago. You just kept pretending it hadn't." I signed the contract with shaking hand, pen hovering over the line for a long moment. This signature meant something different than the marriage certificate. This one required me to actually be someone. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me. Show up. Do the work. Thank me in 6 months if you're still employed." He took the signed contract, handed me a copy and an address. "Studio apartment. Keys are with the building manager. First shift tomorrow, 7 a.m. Patrick will train you on the reservation system." He walked to the door, paused. "You've never had to work for anything, Beulah. That's my fault as much as yours. But that ends today. Everything from now on, you earn." 1 week later, I stood inside Murphy's table, watching the ribbon cutting through the front window. Local press gathered outside. My father and Patrick posed with large ceremonial scissors, cutting the ribbon together. The photo would show two men who'd rebuilt something, not just a restaurant, but themselves. I wore professional attire I'd bought from a discount store, modest dress, sensible shoes. Nothing designer, nothing I couldn't afford on my new salary. I stood at the host stand, greeting customers, learning the reservation system, taking names phonetically on my notepad because I kept forgetting them. Patrick passed my station mid-shift, paused. "You seated that four-top by the window?" "Yes. Was that wrong?" "No. Good instinct. That's our best natural light table. Professional, not warm, but acknowledging competence. The reservation system shows red when we're overbooked. That's when you offer the bar for drinks. Always give a specific wait time. Don't say soon. People need numbers. I'm sorry, I know I'm slow at this. Stop apologizing. Just learn faster. Everyone's slow on day one." He started to walk away, paused. "Focus on being less slow on day 2. I messed up 3 reservations that shift, spilled water on a guest, wrote down the wrong phone number for a party of 6. My feet hurt. My head hurt. I wanted to quit approximately 14 times. At the end of the shift, Patrick said, "Tomorrow, same time. We'll work on the phone protocol." Tomorrow. There would be a tomorrow. I walked to my studio apartment 6 blocks away. Small, plain, furnished with basics, bed, table, chair. Nothing extra, nothing I didn't earn. I looked around at the space and felt something unfamiliar. It was mine through work, not gift. I opened my phone to check tomorrow's schedule. 7 a.m., training, Murphy's table. Set an alarm, realized I needed to buy an alarm clock because I couldn't rely on phone battery. Made a note, buy alarm clock. First item on first to-do list of actual adult responsibilities. I sat on the edge of the bed, removed my shoes, heels I'd worn because they looked professional but hadn't realized would hurt. My feet ached, my pride ached more. But I'd shown up. I'd tried. I'd made it through day 1. Tomorrow, I'd be better. Or, at least, less terrible. That would have to be enough. I was 38 years old, and I was just starting to grow up. I turned off the light, thinking about alarm clocks and reservation systems and specific wait times instead of saying soon. Tomorrow. I'd deal with tomorrow when it came. For the first time in my life, that felt like something I could actually do. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching,